Good day and welcome to another episode of the Queensland Rail History Podcast. I'm Annette, and as always, it's great to have you along with us today as we dive back into the Queensland Rail history vaults. In today's episode, we'll discuss how two electric tilt trains revolutionised the train services between Brisbane and Bundaberg and then on to Rockhampton.
The tilt train, in the 1990s, it was very much the future. The future was coming here, and QR was to be in the lead of that and bringing it in. Still one of those things in this day and age, even a quarter century on, still pretty remarkable.
We'll also chat with one of the project managers involved in the recent upgrades of these electric tilts.
This new technology does give us a lot more reliable and a better performing traction package on our trains.
Be that as it may, we, in common with the whole community, hail with pleasure the inauguration of the railway in Queensland.
An old woman in our carriage was very proud of this little bit of railroad.
I'm here in Toowoomba with Greg, our historian. How are you today, Greg?
Oh, good day to you, Annette. How lovely to be talking to you again and embarking again on some more of the exciting stories of the Queensland Railways, and also looking forward and recognising that we're heading towards 160 years of the railways being first opened here in Queensland, and the first construction work starting on them as well too. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are anyway.
So we're going to talk about inventions and how Queensland are innovative and how Queensland have pioneered through the times. What are we going to talk about today, Greg?
Right, Annette. Well, we're actually going to be talking about a very significant event in the story of Rollingstock here in Queensland. So you mentioned about innovations, innovative concepts that Queenslanders have pioneered. We go back to the 1,067mm railway gauge, of course, the narrow gauge here in Queensland. We're going to take this, though, into the latter part of the 20th century, and we're going to talk about Queensland Rail's tilt train, the first one that was introduced, which is the electric tilt. It was designed and manufactured here in Queensland, although it was also involved other partners from around the world as well. And it used technology that was designed, manufactured, and delivered by the Hitachi company. And the idea was that the tilt train would use, to a large extent, existing tracks or existing alignments that were in Queensland on the North Coastline, but also enable trains to travel at a higher speed as well, maintaining as well a higher level of comfort for passengers and everything like that. So it was a compromise to ensure that Queensland Railways in QR in the latter 20th century could develop a train that could run at a higher speed and also an electric train as well. And it was to bring that innovation as well, which was tilt train technology, which was utilised in a number of very large railways around the world. But what was specifically, it was brought home here to Queensland, and it was a first for Australia, of course, as well too. QR was ahead of the tracks, or ahead of the game yet again. 2023 was when Queensland Rail's tilt train, the electric tilt, it actually turned 25. People don't think about it when they think about fast trains and things like that overseas. They talk about the TGV trains in France, Japan's famous Shinkansens, the bullet trains and things like that. But first things first, the tilt train, the electric tilt train here in Queensland, it does actually hold the record for the fastest train speed that was ever recorded in Australia. That was 210 kilometres an hour. That was on a test run that was organised in about 1998, 1999. It was done under supervised conditions and things like that, and it did set the Australian rail speed record at that stage, yeah. But I think the thing that went into it too was not only they talk about the speed and that, there was the comfort angle that went into the electric tilt train as well too. A bit of the background story was in the early 1990s, Queensland Rail decided new trains were needed on the Brisbane to Rockhampton route. At that time, there were existing trains that did run. There was the old Sunlander, of course. There was the Spirit of Capricorn services, which was an electric service. It was introduced in about 1988, 1989, and was running between Brisbane and Rockhampton. The Sunlander was, for many years, called diesel electric haul. After electrification in 1989 between Brisbane and Rockhampton, electric locos were used to haul the Sunlander train. Spirit of Capricorn was the inner city express carriages, the ICE carriages. That was specifically run from Brisbane through to Rockhampton. The tilt train was the next step up, and it was to take that experience between Brisbane and Rockhampton, but basically to provide a faster timetabled service than was currently in place.
Sorry, Greg, I just want to interrupt for a second. We've talked about the life cycle of trains many times over our podcast.
Of course.
So if the Spirit of the Capricorn was introduced in 1988 or 1989, and then in the 1990s we start looking at a replacement, it had a really short life.
It did actually, and I think it was part of that thing, the 1990s. You mentioned about technology and innovation and those sorts of concepts that were coming into it as well. It was also looking at developing something for Queenslanders, and it was literally taking that next step up. We had a service between Brisbane and Rockhampton, Brisbane to Bundaberg, of course, very popular train routes there on the north coastline. But it was actually being able to deliver something again which would provide a much improved timetable and things like that as well. Spirit of Capricorn, as you said, was only introduced in 1989. The success of that electric service was quite literally the doorway into for the tilt train. It was very popular on that way. The tilt train, in the 1990s, it was very much the future. The future was coming here, and QR was to be in the lead of that and bringing it in. It actually was over 30 years ago that Walkers actually were, Maryborough, they began building 2 electric 6-car tilt train services. So that's 30 years ago in 1994. Testing began in 1997. There were 12 months of test runs before they were actually introduced formally into service. And that was in November of 1998.
Quick question again. You may not know, but why do they test it for a whole year first?
Oh, that's easy. And it was all new technology, the tilt mechanism itself, and there were a whole host of other things that went with it as well too, So there was the other things that they introduced along the way was looking at they were introduced things that were actually GPS based. There's also an electronic system that they used which would actually identify through GPS and things like that for the trains like a transponder. So it'd actually also work out when they're coming up to curves and things like that. And the computers on board would actually start, preparing to tilt the train and things like that. So it wasn't just the train itself, which was entirely new. It was also the familiarisation that went with it, the driver trainings that went with it, and there was also the support that went with it, new service depots and everything like that. It was an entirely brand new concept, but the other thing that went with it too was signalling. It was also had to go with it as well. So it was just an entire new way of bringing into service an entire new train, and 12 months of trial runs and everything like that, just to make sure basically it was all fit for service, as they say in this day and age.
So I'm interested to know, you said that Walkers in Maryborough built a train.
Yep.
Was there a tender process here? I know as Queensland Rail we love to manufacture in Queensland as much as possible, but did we go out to tender for these?
Oh yeah, they went through a full tender process and everything like that. Walkers, of course, who worked on it, and ETI later on, but Walkers and that, but they actually went into partnerships with this, and that was working with the Hitachi company, for the tilt train, because the mechanisms that went with it, the computer work and all the technology that went with it as well. So it was actually a very big, it was a consortium approach that went with it as well too. Completely different from the old days that were spoken about, where one company built all basically. In this sort of environment, and it was very much like consortium. It was partner based and everything like that.
Fast forward to today, and that consortium is still very much alive and well, with our regional Rollingstock team working hard to keep our ETT fleet running smoothly.
What we're trying to achieve was to leverage the most recent technology in Japan. So we're trying to leverage the new technology there, but retrofit it as a plug-and-play piece into our trains.
That's Jack. Jack is an Alliance Project Delivery Manager here at Queensland Rail. I recently met up with Jack to hear all about the electric tilt train traction upgrade project. Wow, what a mouthful. That has recently been undertaken. So, hi Jack, thank you so much for joining us today on the Queensland Rail History Podcast. How are you?
Hi Nat, thank you, and thanks for your invitation. Very good, thank you. It's my first time doing a podcast, so very different experience to what I'm used to.
Yep, don't be nervous, you're with friends. Jack, could you please tell us a little bit about your career so far at Queensland Rail, and how long have you been with us?
I started in September 2022, and during this time I've worked on 6 to 7 projects. They've ranged from changing the North Coast Line timetable, which was one of the initial initiatives, and that was to really help support the ETT traction package project that we'll talk about in a bit. I've worked on the DTT overhaul project.
What's a DTT?
Very good question. So in Queensland Rail, we've got a fleet of tilt trains, and we've got two types of tilt trains. We've got the diesel tilt trains, and we call that DTTs for short. Externally to Queensland Rail, they're also known, they've got a few names. They're also known as the Spirit of Queensland. And these trains run up all the way to Cairns. And then we've also got the ETT, so that's the electric tilt trains. These trains run up to Rockhampton and Bundaberg. Yep, so ETTs are more traditionally known as the tilts, but they're all tilt trains. And what really surprised me when I first joined Queensland Rail was that we've got 3 DTTs and 2 ETTs in the fleet.
Okay, you would think it would be the other way around because the ETTs run almost daily, don't they?
Yeah, it's quite amazing how we manage such a long distance and such a large timetable with the fleet. The difference is that the DTTs can run all the way to Cairns and the ETTs can only run up to Rockhampton because of the electrification. So we don't actually have that infrastructure that goes all the way north. In my mind, that's why we've only got 2 ETTs and 3 DTTs.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the upgrades your teams have undertaken on the electric tilt trains?
One of the most significant heavy maintenance upgrades that we've recently undertaken is the traction package upgrade project. For those listeners who may not know what it is, and a disclaimer for those who may know, because I'm not technical in background, the traction package is essentially, if you imagine like a box that sits underneath the train, on the undercarriage, is fitted to the undercarriage, which contains a number of components that are required to accelerate the train and brake and help the train brake. It's, I guess, using an analogy, you can imagine something like an engine, or I was talking to my engineers because I was trying to understand what it was when I first started the project. An engine or a muscle. We're trying to still figure out which one is the best analogy for it. But yeah, think like either your muscle or an engine of a vehicle. That's what the traction package is. It's kind of like putting a new graphics card in your PC. You can't physically see the difference, but you can feel it, if that makes sense.
Yes, because Hitachi originally had something to do with our tilt trains as well. So it's great to know that they've done the upgrade on our trains that are 25 years old now.
Yeah, so we've managed to leverage, without changing the rest of the train, we've managed to pretty much manufacture a new piece of traction package equipment using new technology into our trains.
Yeah, that's fantastic because when we first bought Hitachi, we basically bought it off the shelf with their programs.
Yep.
And it fit to our trains, but it would fit to our trains around the world. So the fact that they've custom built this to upgrade is just amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. And even the equipment, when we had to retrofit it, we've noticed that it's a lot lighter. So we had to put a bit more weight bearing into it. So the technology's actually shrunk down quite a bit. It's just really cool. If you think like mobile phones, they shrunk. They're kind of getting bigger again, but generally technology shrinks. And that's what's happened with the traction package. So the new equipment's actually become more condensed and lighter. And this is my assumption. I'm not an engineer, so because the train works on tilting, you need to manage the weight. And this is part of that weight management to make sure that it weighs the same. So we're not impacting any of the other train systems. I was like, whoa, didn't know we had to do that.
Yeah.
In terms of benefits, we now know that our parts aren't obsolete. So the original parts were about 20 years old, or over 20 years old. So that was the risk of if anything fell apart, we would be quite at strife. This new technology does give us a lot more reliable and a better performing traction package on our trains. But then it's kind of a cost benefit piece because we know we have to do it because say with the traction package, they're obsolete. We know that they were going through a phase where they were starting to not perform as well and were starting to fail. And if we had a significant failure on the fleet, you permanently lose maybe a train. And that's a bigger issue than being able to control that change through a timetable change and doing the maintenance work to safeguard the services.
Yeah, proactive maintenance, always better than reactive maintenance.
Yep.
Can I ask, sorry, this isn't a question I had on my list. What kind of testing period have we had with these? So the original tilt train, when we were introducing that on our network, we tested it for a whole year before it went out to customers.
Yep.
What kind of testing's gone on with all this new equipment that's gone on?
So because we've got two, in terms of testing, for the first set of traction packages that we installed onto the trains, we did a type test-based approach. That was about, from memory, about 3 months of testing.
Wow.
Just for the traction package. A lot of late nights for the team, a lot of long days. I think essentially after we did the testing for the first one, for the second train, because we did type testing, it was only about 2 weeks, plus a bit more, just like reliability running after that.
So when you were doing the testing, were you going all the way to Rockhampton?
Nah, we had segments booked out for the testing. Yeah, so there were a few markers just like kind of over my head. I just sat on the train before I did join them. And it's just like literally like back and forth for like 10 kilometers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of walking. I lost a lot of calories, I reckon, on that one.
So will our customers notice a difference with this upgrade?
No, our customers should not notice any differences to this upgrade. And if they haven't noticed the difference, that's a very big tick for the project. That's a win for us. This is a type of upgrade that is to safeguard our operations, and there shouldn't be any impacts to the customers. And even the quality of ride should maintain the same.
We'll hear more from Jack about his career and involvement in the tilt train a little later on. Now, back to my conversation with Greg, where Queenslanders are about to be introduced to their brand new ETTs and immediately reap the benefits of a faster timetable.
When they actually came in, those new trains, the two electric tilts, they were actually named one after the city of destination, one after the city of construction. So the driver units, and the one was called the City of Rockhampton, the other was the City of Maryborough. The daily services commenced between Brisbane and Rockhampton. Because of the new tilt design technology that came in, the timetable was improved, and that made it 2 hours quicker than the older Spirit of Capricorn service. So the Spirit of Capricorn used to take 9 hours, and the improved tilt train service was taking 7 hours. I guess you'd say, it did mark the end of the line for the Spirit of Capricorn service, the trains that used to operate from Brisbane Rockhampton. With the withdrawal of the Spirit of Capricorn trains, and that they became, ice trains, that used to run Brisbane, Nambour, and other places as well. People will be very, very familiar with those as well.
Quick question. Sorry, I'm going to stop saying quick question.
No, Ned, they're great questions from you. Let's just call them great question, please. Yep.
You mentioned the technology that Hitachi provided. Was that dedicated to Queensland Rail only? Is it installed anywhere else around the world, or did they manufacture it for us?
Oh, it was it was like a built to design thing. But Hitachi have been involved, and there have been other tilt trains that run around that have been in operation throughout the world. Even in Sweden, they've been operating tilt trains and things like that as well. So it's one of those things that's sort of like, we go back to the 1860s, the technology that was around the world being used, in the initial construction of the railways here in Queensland. Again, it was adapted and brought in and, specifically for here in Queensland. When the electric tilt came in, it actually made it some of the fastest timetable runs in Australia over distance. And from 1998, they started moving passengers between Brisbane, Bundaberg and Rockhampton. They're based from Bundaberg with, train crews and things like that. They were running up to 160 kilometre an hour on the North Coast line. For the Rockhampton tilt train, the electric tilt, Hitachi provided technology systems, as we mentioned about tilting system. There's also the traction system in that, the auxiliary power and fault management subsystem. So, basically all the computer hardware and everything like that.
The brain of the train.
That's great. Yeah, the brain of the train. I like that. The Spirit of Queensland services, as we call them today, the diesel tilts, Hitachi actually provided the tilting system on those as well. Well, with the tilts, they cover the 351 kilometres between Brisbane and Bundaberg in 4 hours and 30 minutes. That's a huge improvement. During the steam era, it used to take about 10 hours to go from Brisbane to Bundaberg by steam train, and it wasn't improved much when the diesels came in as well in it anyway. So that's a huge improvement that went with it. And the 639 kilometres between Brisbane and Rockhampton was 7 hours and 30 minutes. And so here you can see, it was a huge improvement over the timetables. They were incredibly popular and always booked out ahead as well. The marketing that went with it, the design, the philosophy, it's the central key to their performance. Basically, when the train heads into a curve at high speed, the entire body of each carriage tilts towards the centre of the curve, and that compensates for the centrifugal force that otherwise pushed passengers towards the outside of the curve. I'm sure we've all been in those situations, but cars or something like that, you go into a curve, and as I said, at the speed, and you feel yourself pushed. The idea of the tilt train is it leans into the curve, okay, and it pivots and it leans into the curve, and that ensures that you don't get that sideways centrifugal force that comes to you as well too. Because it tilts, because it leans, because it leans, it diesel leans, because it leans into the curve, it does also enable the train to travel at that higher rate of speed into it as well.
Now, I did a little bit of homework here, and I find it really interesting that we have a train that tilts into the curve, whereas a lot of other countries have banked the tracks so that the train goes with that. Why didn't we go with this method? Why are we so different?
There are a couple of things involved. One was the distances involved. It wasn't like in shorter distances in other parts of the world. There was also the economics involved. There was a major amount of realignment that went with the introduction of the tilt train on the north coastline, especially between Brisbane to Gympie, and especially Gympie through to Rockhampton, and Gympie to Maryborough, and also to Bundaberg. There's a lot of realignment that went on. There was also straightening of sections of the north coastline that went with it. So it wasn't just the train itself, it wasn't the fact that it was electrified and all the other technology, but there was realignments and changes to the tracks that went with it as well too. There's also a cost that was involved too. So to run trains at a higher speed, the philosophy is a straight level track is a great way to run a train at its highest speed if you need it, dedicated to it. The tilt train represented a compromise. So with alignments but still working with the existing infrastructure that was there at that stage, you could achieve that high timetable speed for your train. And also with the use of the tilt, it also allowed for that improvement on timetable. So it was a compromise, there's no two ways about it. But it was an innovative compromise as well too, especially at that stage. But I know it all sounds simple in principle. It's very technically challenging to achieve in practice. I mentioned before about GPSs and that. There's sensors on the track that are needed to tell the train its position, and that's based on a database that's actually within the train itself. And that database that links back to the sensors and their line and everything that, and further back to GPS, it actually tells you which curve is coming up and where. So it knows, basically the train knows that there's a curve coming up at this location or somewhere like that, and also, to start putting the tilt mechanism into operation.
Sorry, I have a question. Markers that tell the train it's coming into a curve, do they have them staggered along the way, or are they literally just when you're coming up to a curve? Like it goes, here we're coming up to a curve. It's not going to give you, we're at the 900th kilometre mark, and I know we don't go to 900 kilometres.
Yeah.
But, so are they just on curves?
They're pretty much along the entire route. So they're like waypoints and things like that. So, and also tells the train, where it is at a certain time. So, when it's working on within the timetable, the train knows where it is, what location it's coming to, stations, structures, and all those sorts of things. It's all like a transponder system in a lot of ways that aircraft have as well. It is a transponder system. So at all times, the train basically knows where it is and, what's coming up. We mentioned curves and things like that, but there's other things, it might be crossing loops or, stations and things like that. So in a world of automated intelligence and things like that, the train's working out where it is all the time, basically, and thinking where it is. So Eileen knows these things and knows where it is at all times. Yeah, so the train uses that information about each curve, as I said, it's stored in that onboard computer, and it adjusts the timing, the amount of tilt precisely so as to ensure that maximum passenger comfort is still maintained. So it knows, this curve will require this amount of tilt, and it enacts it accordingly, I'm still astounded, as a historian, because I was around when it was being introduced and all the work that went into it. And, it's still one of those things in this day and age, even a quarter of a century on, still pretty remarkable. In 2003, there was the next major revolution that took place in train travel, and they introduced the Brisbane to Cairns and back to Brisbane diesel tilt train, dieselling. The new ones, which are now the Spirit of Queensland, or the diesel tilt as they used to be called, it had 7 passenger cars. There were 2 high-performance, low-weight power cars, one at the front, one at the back, and they operated in a push-and-pull configuration. So one would pull at the front, one would push at the back. So that would provide the power and everything like that. The beauty of that, because you've got one at the front, one at the back, pushing and pulling you along, It did away with all the jolting you used to get traditionally from trains when you just got a locomotive up the front, steam, diesel, electric. It pulls and everything goes, sort of thing, there's a jolt. When it stops, there's that jolt again sort of thing. If you've got push and pull, it's much smoother, and braking's much easier as well too. We had tilt technology, we had the track improvements we spoke about. That allowed your train to travel at a higher speed. You tilt the train body, the speed around the curves then can be increased by 25%, and you've still got very comfortable passenger levels on board. So there you go. So that's the secret. Tilt, you get faster into the curves, come out of the curves faster, and your timetable improves as a result.
And I went on the Spirit of Queensland last year.
Oh, good for you.
I can say that I did not notice feeling the tilt on any of those curves as we were going along.
Isn't that great? Technology is doing its job in that, and I'm glad to say in that case, yeah. While you were sitting back, hopefully enjoying your journey and watching Queensland roll past the window and had a nice rate of knots and that.
Oh, and I want to say, listening to our podcast too, you could actually listen to our podcast while you're on the train.
Oh, thank you. Did I put you to sleep in that on the journey or something like that, you know?
I may have played it for my daughter to knock her out.
Oh, I'm glad to
just
hear
kidding.
that now. I do serve a useful purpose after all. I'm glad for this anyway. So while you're sitting there enjoying it and hopefully watching the rest of Queensland roll past your window, at that time, onboard computers, they're controlling the tilt angle, and that's activated by compressed air cylinders. Now, underneath the train body and around the bogies, they've got compressed air cylinders, and these are the things that actually push and then contract, and that moves that train body into the tilt and that, you know. But that's it. So it's compressed air, you know, it pushes and then pulls the carriage around, everything like that.
This push, pull and tilting calculation is happening constantly. The customers on board, totally unaware and busy enjoying the scenic views. As I chatted with Jack about the ETT upgrade, I heard about one of his experiences on board the train and the customers he interacted with on his journey. Can you tell me why you think these electric tilt trains and even the DTTs are important to Queenslanders?
I didn't really appreciate how much these trains meant to Queenslanders until I did a project to the North Coast Line Operational Readiness Project, which was done to enable us to take one of the ETTs out to service. And to do that, we've actually had to look at the whole timetable and interact with the staff and also our customers to let them know that the timetable is changing. And it's through that process that I really appreciate that a lot of our customers do rely on the trains for hospital services, especially from Rocky and Bundy to come down to Brisbane. So that's something that really stood out to me. Also, these trains are used for a bit of tourism, but also I did catch the trains early on when I first started for one of the projects up to Maryborough. And I did meet some of the passengers, and I met an old lady who was traveling, who does an annual trip to see her sister in Tasmania, and she would catch the ETT to the airport in Brisbane to fly out. I had a really good conversation with her, and then what it meant to her to catch a train and to travel to see her sister. And she said that she will always catch the ETT. That was her journey, pretty much. That was her routine and pattern. And also you hear stories of like, there's apparently there's a story that there's a particular station, I will not name station names, but he will always be at that particular station waiting for the same ETT service. He'll get on, sit in the same seat and order, there's a sandwich that he'll order, a particular meal. And that was his routine. It shows like how much people appreciate the service, and also not just our customers, our staff too. In Gracemere, we've got a really dedicated team there who they treat the ETT like their baby. They do such a good job to maintain it and to look after it. I'm always amazed when I go there. It's like you can see the pride of the train and what it means to them. So yeah, it's got a lot of meaning to a lot of different groups. That's what I found. To me, that demonstrated how much it means for people in terms of like connecting people, families as well. The value that these trains bring to our community.
Yeah, I actually caught the Spirit of Queensland last year up to Cairns with my family.
Oh, nice.
And the train was totally booked out.
Oh, yep.
So
Did you go railbed or?
no,
Yep.
no. I thought I was getting in early. Like literally, I booked 6 months in advance, and the rail beds were all booked out.
Yeah, they're super popular.
Yeah, very, very popular. But yeah, there wasn't a single seat that was empty for the entire journey.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and both ways, to Cairns and back. It was just crazy.
Truckers. Oh, nice.
So yeah.
That's on my to-do list.
So what sparked your interest to join Queensland Rail?
What sparked my interest? I'd say Queensland Rail was where I started my career in projects. It wasn't in Queensland Rail. I was working for another organization and we were contracted in to do a project. And it was really there that I got to get my first step into project world, really experience what it was to deliver projects. And I really enjoyed the culture and the time there. I really fondly reflect on memories of working here. And that's what, and since then, I went on to other projects. I even moved to Western Australia. But I've always it's always been something that I've looked fondly back on. So when the opportunity came up to return back to Queensland Rail to become a project manager and bring in all the experience I've had throughout the years since then, that's what kind of brought me back.
Yeah.
Got a bit excited.
Yeah. Have you been surprised by the range of different projects you've been able to have a hand in while you've been here?
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. I was brought in on the understanding of Rollingstock heavy maintenance projects, not expecting that I'll be involved in the operation side of the business to have to manage like operational changes and changing the timetable. I thought it would be just mainly on the equipment. And also, we're also supporting some of our maintenance sites like Portsmouth as well. So they were looking at upgrading the TPA facilities, and they've gotten one of my other it's like a pet small project is helping them with upgrading their shunt tractor as well for shunting in the yard. A bit different, but it mixes up the day. It's really very interesting. Lots of learning.
Lots of learning.
Yeah.
I love that. Queensland Rail has the best place to seriously continue to grow and learn and advance yourself. I came in as IT and I'm currently in marketing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So if you look at where you can take your career, Queensland Rail's the place, like seriously.
That's really cool. That's good to know.
Yep, yep. Sorry, Greg, I'm just reading your specs that you've got here.
Yeah.
And you talk about how they're lightweight. Says that the power car weighs 64 tonnes and the trailer car weighs 42 tonnes.
Yeah, they are light. That's lightweight. Yeah.
That's crazy to consider that lightweight. What would a normal one, like the old school Spirit of Capricorn, weight?
Put it this way, power car is 64 tonnes for, that. Steam locomotives, the largest in Queensland, were 130 tonnes. And the BBs and the engines, 1079, 1089, they're 101 tonnes. And even the AC16 is about 90 tonne. So for the power they push out, in comparative, they're lightweight, and that's the beauty of them.
Okay, so we're going to have a power car at the front, a power car at the back.
Yep.
And then 6 or 7 trailer cars in the middle.
That's exactly right. So, yeah. When you look about, that scale and capacity there, that's the mass of them. You're looking only about 400 tonne, 400 or 500 tonne of train all up. It's not much. What were the L series cars? L series are about 30 tonne or something like that. And they used to run, they could run up 15 cars or something like that, with diesels on the front. So that's about, 500-600 tonne of train. So it's compact and it's lightweight, but you got these engines that deliver so much power, sort of thing,
And that must be empty too. How much diesel do they carry?
They carry enough fuel on them in that to run about 1,000 kilometres. So it's 1,000 kilometres to the tanks anyway. So that's 600 miles in the old currency. So that's about 1,000 kilometres is probably getting close to 2/3 of the way up the north coastline and back. The other good thing about the tilt design was, it's much lighter in construction as well too. And again, the benefit of that, of course, it doesn't mean you haven't got as much mass, it's not as heavy, so you can move that higher timetable speed as well. Up the front, the power car, the drivers, there's a crew of 2 out there. Beyond that is also they've got multi-function couplers and they're fully interchangeable. And the idea of that basically is that the couplers and things like that, should there be a breakdown, something like that, they can put a diesel to pull you out of trouble and things like that. For those who are very interested in the technology side and things like that, now each power car is powered by 2 12-cylinder turbocharged diesel engines, and each of those is capable of producing 1,350 kilowatts. There's also hydrodynamic transmissions and axle drive gearboxes as well too. So it's pretty much like a big diesel hydraulic system that is in the power unit up the front there and at the back.
It just sounds like a rev head's dream.
It's incredible sort of thing, yes. It was described to me when they first came into usage and things like that in 2003. I did comment to one of the early drivers on it. He said, it's a very powerful beast indeed, sort of thing. The other big improvement, I know in the past we've spoken about steam and diesel and we talked about fuel capacity, water capacity, in the steam area and the diesels. Diesel locomotives on runs from Brisbane through to Cairns, having to refuel at places like Rockhampton and places like that. Steam locomotives are really only good for about, 200 kilometres at the most with coal and water and things like that. It was fuel tanks that they were introduced on the diesel tilt, of course, they limited the refuelling to once per journey. So in that 1,700 kilometre journey from Brisbane through to Rockhampton, you only had to top up once. So for the people who do drive those in long distances, only having to fill up once would be, a much better option for you.
Yep, would be very happy not to have that many stops.
Oh, yes. Exactly, yeah. They also had an auxiliary power synchronisation system on board on the diesel tilts, and it also gave multiple auxiliary alternators to power the train auxiliary. So basically there's whole lots of redundant and extra power units, that are running at all time, supplying the power and supplying the electric power within the diesel system as well too. So it's really like an onboard powerhouse, and you've got 2 of those, doing all the hard work basically and providing all the, not only providing the power, providing the speed and providing, everything on board so that the likes of Annette and that can enjoy a comfortable trip on the Spirit of Queensland train. Yeah.
I tell you what, it let me charge the kids' devices so they were completely entertained for our journey up to Cairns.
Yep.
So that was a good thing. And yes, the kids did love that trip. And it's these kind of family holidays, catching a train or a plane, that you will always look back on fondly. So with my conversations with Jack, it was a question I had to put to him as well. Do you have any childhood memories of trains growing up?
I used to catch the Beenleigh line from high school, up and down to Southend from Old Tandy. So that used to be my daily commute way back. But I guess from a long distance point of view, kind of like early life memory would be kind of in the opposite direction though. From Roma Street, we caught the train to Sydney, and from Sydney we went to Canberra. That was a trip with my mum and my siblings to visit my auntie who was working there at the time. And it's quite a fond memory because since then, my mum's passed away, so it's something that I look back fondly on for that journey and that experience.
Yeah, they definitely make memories. You get enough time to sit down and have a good conversation.
Yeah. To annoy my brother and sister. Yeah.
Oh, on my trip recently, there was 2 siblings sitting together, a boy and a girl, and oh my goodness, they were not making happy memories. It was a long journey with them on the train. But
oh, yeah.
yeah, it was good because my husband sat one side and I sat the other, so we had a kid each.
Oh,
and then when we got tired of that kid, we swapped.
The old switcheroo. Nice.
But yeah, the brother and sister sat together for the whole way, and I was just like, Mum, you need to get these 2 apart.
Yeah.
Seriously. Whew. So thinking about your role here at Queensland Rail, what does connection mean to you?
Ooh. To me, especially as a project delivery manager, connection means connecting people. It's about making sure people are communicating with each other, making sure people understand each other to work towards the same direction. So we're all on the same team. We're all trying to deliver the best services as possible, and also to our customers, and also connecting to customers. So it's like making sure leadership understands the staff, and that we're also connecting with our customers as well.
Yeah, and your little old lady on the train, seriously. I don't think you can get much more connection than that. The yearly trip to go see her sister in Tasmania. Wow.
Some of the people listening to this might remember the famous ad that was introduced in the late 1990s for the tilt train by QR. It features two farmers, and they're out basically in the cane paddock somewhere in Queensland, supposedly Bundaberg or somewhere like that. So it's during the crush, it's during the cane fire burn. So they're out there getting ready and to set fire to the cane before they harvest and everything like that. And next thing you just hear this noise, and next thing this blast of wind goes through, and next thing all the fires put out and everything like that, and two farmers are left blinking. One farmer turns to the other and said, "Did you see the tilt train go through?" And that was the marketing ad from QR at that stage. It was a winner.
I'm going to have to find that one. I want to see it. I vaguely remember something like that, but I never would have recalled it if you hadn't have mentioned it.
It was better than the Working Class Man video with Jimmy Barnes and the cane fires anyway, so there you go. The other thing I forgot to mention, the education program was very big with communities about train safety and that, and something that's still continued in Queensland Rail today. And there was also just the entire familiarisation with train crews and that. Originally, the tilt train drivers and that had their own special uniforms, and they were modelled on airline pilots as well too, with the hats and everything like that. And the onboard staff, of course, had their own special dedicated tilt uniforms as well too. So it was an entire branding exercise that went with it, and marketing design that went with it as well. Yeah, it was a real statement, as Queensland Rail were moving into the 21st century, delivering something like that. And I think that entire project idea is something that's very big still within Queensland Rail today, and about looking at everything, not just in isolation, but sort of like as an entire package that's all delivered for the traveller into the 21st century.
So what do you think your future career looks like with Queensland Rail?
Oh, future career? Only a year and a half, just under a year and a half in, but definitely where my passion is projects, doing new things, creating value for the business. Really enjoyed some of the changes that we've been delivering, and I do see quite an exciting future for Queensland Rail and some of the new initiatives that are coming into play. Watch this space. It'll be definitely around projects and making meaningful changes to the business as well.
So you mentioned Voon as one of the electrical engineers who worked on the ETT project.
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit about him?
Yeah, so Voon he actually works for SEQ. So if we talk about one team in Queensland Rail, he's part of demonstrating this one team value, where he's come into our regional team as the traction specialist from an electrical point of view. Voon has actually been with this project from the very beginning. He's the one who was part of the team who flagged that the equipment was obsolete and that we needed to replace it. He's been part of the whole design, manufacturing. We sent him to Japan to do the factory acceptance testing with Hitachi as well. So he's been instrumental to the whole piece. I would say he's way more important than me, if anything. If you have a key resource, it'll be him. They have to protect and bubble wrap during the project. Yeah, so he's been instrumental. Because this project has been going for about 4 years. During this time, we have had a few project managers come through. And he's been that consistent resource person throughout the whole journey, who's really been the glue to hold it all together, to make sure that we've achieved such a successful outcome.
Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us today. We've learnt a lot about the project to upgrade the ETTs.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a very fun and really interesting experience. So thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to have a chat about the project.
I think it's a remarkable quarter of a century. The tilts are still very popular. It's over 20 years now since Spirit of Queensland trains, the diesel tilts, have been operating. They're still very popular.
That was one thing that surprised me, and I know that sounds bad, But when we did catch the Spirit of Queensland, every seat was booked. There was nothing left. It was completely booked out. And that was only September last year.
That's good.
Totally booked out.
I think it's just something about how people feel about sort of travel as well too. The other thing, Annette, did you go to Cairns? Was that your trip to Cairns, was it?
That was all the way to Cairns.
Oh,
the
that's
kids
great.
and I went all the way to Cairns and back again on the SAQ.
Of course, and you had your trip on the Corinda Scenic Railway, of course, too. And,
oh my God, I love that train.
I know, sort of thing. Yeah, the best of both worlds. So can thank Queensland Rail Travel for that. Very good. From Brisbane to Cairns was about 55 hours in the steam era with the trains like the Sunshine Express. It took a long time because basically steam locomotives, as you know, and it had to be changed, or relays, different crews, and reprovisioning of the train along the way, putting dining cars on, putting dining cars off, and everything like that. You do from Brisbane to Cairns on the diesel tilt. It's about half that time now anyway, about 25, 26 hours, as you remarked on. Remarkable stuff indeed.
Yeah, we had 26 hours because there was some track upgrades happening.
Exactly, So you're looking literally in that, when you did your journey up, if you'd done it by 60 years ago or something like that, or 70 years ago, the trip would have taken twice as long with multiple changes of steam locomotives along the well. And not counting for soot and cinders and other things that would have come in through open windows for you as well.
Yeah, but like we've talked about, if I was doing this journey 70 years ago, I'd probably be going for a month to 2 months for my summer solstice, have a sleep away. Yep.
That's not a bad idea, Annette, anyway. We all deserve a long break when we work very hard, such as you do anyway, and it's a good thing to see.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode on the electric tilt train. And a big thanks to our guest interviewee today, Jack from the regional Rollingstock team. If you have any questions about our rail history, please email Greg. He would love to hear from you. history@qr.com.au. And if you're enjoying what you're hearing, please leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you, what you love about the podcast and what you would like us to feature in a future episode. You've been listening to the Queensland Rail History Podcast, hosted by our historian, Greg Hallam, and myself, Annette, with a new episode every month.